And quite strikingly, a large majority oppose preventive war. That's the U.S. official doctrine held by both candidates in gross violation of international law and the Nuremberg Charter. A large majority think that the United States should keep within the UN Charter limits. That about 25% say the U.S. should, any state, should resort to force only if attacked. It's a narrow interpretation of the Charter. And over half say, accept a slightly broader interpretation of the Charter, accepting the legitimacy of preemptive war, which means use of force when you are, an attack is imminent. So like a plane's flying across the Atlantic to bomb New York or something like that. So around 75% totally oppose official policy of both parties on a very crucial issue. Large majorities believe that the United States should increase spending on health, education, and social security. On specific issues, there are also stands are taken radically different from the elite bipartisan consensus. So on Israel-Palestine, 75% believe the United States should be neutral. 17% think it should tilt toward Israel. Well, all of these things are interesting in themselves. They also tell us a lot about the state of American democracy, because these positions are off the agenda. They're not in the electoral agenda. The positions are barely advocated anywhere near the mainstream, which means that most of the people who gave those responses have never heard them. They're making them up for themselves. Probably think they're the only people who hold them. If these issues were a topic of live debate and discussion, I don't think there's much doubt that the numbers would be much higher. Well, that is one illustration of a serious democratic deficit, the technical term for countries that have formal democratic institutions, but they don't function substantively. The polls on the election reveal the same thing. Two weeks ago, the Gallup polls asked people, voters, why they're voting for Bush or Kerry, and they had a set of choices. One of the choices was favor their agenda, ideas, and platform goals. For Bush, that's 6% of Bush's voters. For Kerry, it's 13% of Bush's voters. In other words, practically nobody's is voting for them because of their stand on anything. And that's the way elections are structured. Elections are effectively run by the PR industry, which constructs extravaganzas and which come up every couple of years and tries to focus laser-like attention on them so that that's what people will think of as politics, personalized extravaganzas intermittently, where you focus on qualities, as they call them. As a strong leader, would you like to meet him, or something like that. Not on their stands, not on issues. They have to be kept off the agenda. And if you look at people's attitudes on issues, you can see why. It's not an irrational choice. Well, much of the world perceives this, even if we prefer not to, and it adds to the threat. A couple of words about Iraq. I don't have to talk about the fact that the pretexts for the invasion have successively eroded, so their history. But as they collapse, new ones come along. About a year ago, the discussion fixed on the new standard position, that is, the U.S. invaded Iraq to fulfill what the liberal press calls Bush's messianic vision to bring democracy to Iraq and the Middle East and the world and so on. The reaction in the United States was intriguing. There was near unanimous agreement that that was the goal. Try to find an exception. There are critics, plenty of critics. The critics say it's overreaching, it's not going to work. Noble, inspiring, but beyond our means. Iraqi culture is not advanced enough to be able to accept such dramatic steps or something like that, or to be more realistic. Actually, there's one sector of opinion that disagrees, Iraqis. Just at the time that Bush's messianic vision was announced with great fanfare in Washington, the Washington Post happened to publish a poll of people in Baghdad who were asked why they think the United States invaded Iraq. And there were some who agreed with near unanimous opinion here, 1%. 1% said the goal was to establish democracy. Most of the rest said the obvious. The U.S. invaded Iraq to take control of Iraq's extraordinary energy resources and to have a position to reorganize the region in its interest. Actually, the result was a little more nuanced. 50% said the U.S. wants democracy, but will not allow Iraqis to make their own choices within it. The U.S. will insist on influencing it. That's a sophisticated judgment on what imposition of democracy actually means in the history of the West. England and the Middle East, the United States and its domains, and so on. Well, what is the evidence for and against the view that the U.S. invaded to fulfill Bush's messianic vision? The evidence for it is very straightforward. The president said so. Try to find some other evidence to support that conclusion. Well, statements of benign intent by leaders are totally meaningless. They're completely predictable. They carry no information. And no matter how grotesque the monster is, they make such statements, so we discard them. But apparently not here. It seems that there's near 100% agreement, even among critics. What's the evidence against? I'm not going to run through it, because that would take another hour talk, but it's just about anything you look at. I mean, their own history under the British, which also had pretensions of independence and sovereignty, the history of U.S. domains, long-standing U.S. policy going back to the mid-1940s, which were to control the oil of the Middle East because of what one historian of the industry calls profits beyond the dreams of avarice, but more importantly because it was what was called a stupendous source of strategic power. As Zbigniew Brzezinski put it a few months ago, control of the resources of the Middle East gives the United States critical leverage over the economies of Europe and Asia. Those have been the main competitors and rivals, and a long-standing concern of U.S. policy is they might go in their own independent way, and it still is. You control the lever, you get critical leverage, what George Kennan once called veto power. Actually, 5 minutes thought about what the policies of a sovereign, independent Iraq would be suffices to show that it would never be tolerated. I won't go into that, but think about it. Well, all of this is off the agenda, and it's another illustration of a very serious democratic deficit, something that should concern us. Well, if this conception is accurate, in other words, the Iraqis aspire to the same vision that's described here, and Iraqis agree that there is a cultural problem, social and cultural problem, blocking it, but they think that problem's here, not there. And I think they have a reasonable argument. If that turns out, if that is in fact true, then that's actually a hopeful sign. Because if this problem is here, we can do something about it. A lot. In fact, anything. We're very free, we're very privileged, plenty of opportunities. We don't have to pray that China will rescue the world from U.S. militarism and aggressiveness. We can take care of that right here. But that requires understanding what the problems are, perceiving the democratic deficit, and not being trapped into a belief that democracy means pushing a lever for somebody you like, whose stand you don't understand every couple of years. It's not democracy. It's everyday work to create the basis for a functioning democracy. We have plenty of opportunities. It is possible for them to compel the government, either one, no matter who wins, because they have the same policies in this regard, to compel them to abandon the major war aims in Iraq, which Iraqis understand, even if we prefer not to, and that means going on to dismantle global policies which are very deeply rooted in U.S. history and institutions. It's a lot of work, but within reach. And if that conception is anywhere near accurate, I think it is, there are fateful choices for us to make, fateful for Iraq, for ourselves, and indeed far beyond.